Hi, today we're talking about homeostasis, and I'm specifically talking to my 10-year-old niece. So, homeostasis is the process of keeping the body balanced within a narrow region where we function perfectly. You know, when we go to the playground and we sit on the seesaw, and you go down on one side and I go down on one side, and every once in a while we get perfectly balanced in the middle, kind of like this? That's homeostasis. We want the body to be just like this. We don't want the body to be tipped on one side. We don't want the body to be tipped on the other side. We want it perfectly balanced in the middle. And one of the ways the body does this is through the negative feedback mechanism. What that means is, like, if something goes off, there's another process that's then put into place to pull that back so that the body doesn't become unstable. For instance, when you get cold, you start to shiver. And your shivering generates heat. Or when you get hot, your blood vessels, the little tubes that bring your blood back to your heart, also away from your heart, they dilate, they get bigger. And so that causes you to sweat. You know that, like, when your skin gets wet, that's what that is. It causes you to sweat and it helps to cool you off. That's an example of negative feedback. You know, your body doesn't get too cold or too hot. It's an example of where your body is balancing you perfectly. Another way that the body maintains homeostasis is through positive feedback mechanism. And that's when something goes off, typically it goes wrong. And that process just continues on and on and on until you reach a level of homeostasis once again. For instance, consider this apple. When apples aren't ripe, this one is, and it looks delicious. But when apples aren't ripe, they hang on the tree, and one apple begins to put off a gas, a chemical called ethylene. And once that apple begins to put off ethylene, it begins to ripen. And that gas spreads all throughout the tree and begins to ripen the other apples. And that's an example of positive feedback mechanism, is when something goes off, it starts to produce a gas, but then it produces more and more and more until the apple reaches a place of homeostasis. And the whole tree reaches a place of homeostasis where we have perfectly ripe apples. Now, there is a reason why we use negative feedback mechanism more, and it's because positive feedback mechanism, or the positive feedback loop, typically puts your body in an unstable place that we're not used to. In negative feedback mechanism, something goes wrong and another something steps in to save you from going overboard, essentially. But with the positive feedback mechanism, you basically just have to keep walking down the plank off the ship to reach a place of homeostasis. And that's why it's better to use the positive feedback loop. The negative feedback loop. Sorry.